So I usually do mathematics, but I also like reading. So I present you a tattoo. Have you recognized it's a tattoo? Do you know him? No, you will know him soon.
Minor.
Wow, almost. So I put that it's pi day in 12 days because I'm a mathematician. And this year, Pi Day is special day because it will be the first International Day of Mathematics. So little marketing for mathematics. Okay, so I think it will be sort of a light presentation, this talk, as an introduction. So to set the framework of the talk, I will start with some few quotations. So have you recognized the movie from which this photo comes? It's too small.
What's a movie? What's a movie?
Yes, that's my question. No. It's too small. Okay. Little clue, small clue. If we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. Need a coffee before? That's Lampedusa in the Leopard, and that's the film from Luchino Visconti. Il Gattopardo, Le Guépard. Another quotation in French, this time. Il est important de disposer de connaissances variées et interdisciplinaires pour y vivre avec agilité et prudence, car si nous fabriquons le numérique nous fabrique aussi. That's my translation, so it's not very good, I think, but I think if we make the digital also makes us. A quotation directly in English. Kleros' Handbook of Decentralized Justice. The justice system of the internet age will not come from further streamlining existing processes, but from fundamentally rethinking justice from a first principles perspective. So the idea of this talk is to give a panorama of issues raised by the emergence and development of blockchains and of academic research on such issues. I think that, of course, blockchains introduce major disruptions, both as part of the digital revolution and as for itself. And I think, of course, that from an academic point of view, these issues are demanding of interdisciplinary approaches that would allow for practitioners, legal experts, economists, mathematicians, but also anthropologists, sociologists, historians, geographers, etc., to meet. So the talk is inspired by a paper that I have written about a year ago. It is available on the CRED internet website and HLCNRS with all the references. And when writing it, I was essentially thinking about bridges between network academic scientists and other disciplines. The basic idea is the conviction that the way the digital revolution, including blockchains, impacts human lives and relationships seems to be quite a total way, and that's why it's important to have an as broad as possible understanding of the phenomenon. And as McLuhan says in the Gutenberg Galaxy, the idea is to master the nature and effects of all our technologies instead of being pushed around by them. I have chosen to focus on some of the issues today, of course. And my hope is the following. Maybe some of these issues will not be issues anymore, thanks to you after the talk. So issues are briefly, shortly, technologies, distributed systems, decentralization and trust, network structures, of course, security, privacy, immutability risks, about maybe finding new economic theory models, and I will conclude with interoperability and adoption. So technologies, prepare yourself. Technologies. So blockchain is first a technology, big scoop, or more precisely, the combination of some technologies. And there are other technology revolutions and their implications that we can think of, and that could be in many ways similar to the blockchain technology revolution. Are you ready? That's Sumerian tablet, Louvre. I knew it would be closed yesterday, so it's rattrapage, I don't know. It's rattrapage, how can I say rattrapage? Consolation. That's Ames Mathematical Papyrus, that's a codex. Okay. Now, that's a Gutenberg era press, that's a copy from in Lyon. That's Jacquard Loom, you know, that's the first binary code program. That's personal computer. And now Internet and World Wide Web and blockchain. Okay, so Harold Innis has focused on the notions of space and time applied to medias. Shortly, he classified the medias in two categories: time-binding medias and space, what he calls time-binding medias and space-binding medias. Time-binding medias, they are the clay tablets, stone stels, manuscripts. They are more enduring and lasting. They favor stability, community, tradition, and religion. Space-binding medias, these are like radio, television, mass press. They are more transient and short-lived. They encourage quick changes, materialism, and secularism. I'm not saying we must all agree about this, but I think it helps us to think things about this. Marshall McLuhan sees new technologies as extensions of sense. While exploring cultural transformations resulting from the printing revolution, he concludes that the very media, the media itself, is even more important than the content it diffuses as for the consequences it has on society. The media and the new technologies being seen as an extension of senses that then determines the way we capture world and society. In McLuhan's work, printing is seen as an extension of the view, and electronic media are seen as an extension of the human nervous system in its whole. And I think a very inspiring work is by Elizabeth Eisenstein, who worked on the consequences of the printing revolution, and she developed the concept of what she calls the unacknowledged revolution, about the changes on religion, society, organization, culture, resulting from the printing revolution. For example, in the Gutenberg Galaxy by Marshall McLuhan, he talks about the concept of a nation not being possible to be developed before the printing revolution, because with the printing revolution, there is a new public, and that can create nation. So technologies and medias have broad consequences on lives, deep. Okay, so a few issues. It will go a bit like that, but okay. Distributed systems, decentralization, and trust. So distributed computing, blockchain protocols are solving a very old and classical distributed computing problem. When a program encompasses multiple processes, a process is a computer, a processor in a computer, etc., the fundamental problem is having all the processes cooperate on a common task. So important issues then arise as the tolerance to uncertainty, as you know, and the adversarial influence in a distributed system, which may arise from network delays, faults, even malicious attacks. So there are growing work on the line of recent distributed computing community efforts dedicated to the theoretical aspects of blockchain. So Guéraoui is he gave courses at the Collège de France. About asynchrony, coordinating the actions of processes is crucial for virtually all distributed applications, especially in asynchronous systems. So maybe there is a, comment on dit piste? A path? So Guéraoui, in a quite recent article, argues that there seems to be a common belief that consensus is necessary for solving the double subpending problem, whether it is for a permissionless or a permissioned environment. The typical solution uses consensus to build a totally ordered ledger of submitted transfers. He shows, by introducing something quite technical, a class of consensusless algorithm, that this common belief is false. Consensus is not needed to implement a decentralized asset transfer system. So maybe there are paths to think. You don't agree? Yes. Maybe to say no, but it exists. Guéraoui is not is a good one. Huh? Yes. So it's theoretical anyway. It's distributing computing community, so it's theoretical. But I think it's interesting to know that it exists. Just the idea of my paper was to link different communities working on blockchains, on this kind of to avoid too much specialization. Maybe it's academic. I don't know. Okay. I have that's sort of a question because I'm not so clear about it, but I think it's important to have in mind that, about short word about consensus mechanisms. A consensus mechanism can be thought, as a mechanism to confirm a person's innocence or to discourage him or her to act wrong. What seems clear to me is that the incentives to act not wrong are quite different concepts through computer science, economic lenses for economists and for, law lenses, etc. But I'm not quite clear yet about who says what. But, incentives. Just to cite nice surveys, Kasha and Vukolich, they provide a very nice survey on consensus, and Sorensen tried to establish a framework intended for academic and industrial blockchain researchers as a foundation for the theory of consensus. About decentralization, a few words. So, beyond the centralized mindset, there's, you will tell me it's before blockchains. Anyway, Reznik has a paper that soon discussed how computer modeling activities can help maybe people move beyond the centralized mindset, helping them gain new insights into and appreciation for the workings of decentralized systems. About decentralization analysis, there are tools being developed about measuring decentralization. For example, decentralization metrics can be studied adapting internet measurement techniques. And there's quite a modelization, for example, it's Kwon et al. They define a decentralization with M epsilon delta. That's a state satisfying that there are at least M participants running a node, and the ratio between the total resource power of nodes run by the richest and the details percentile participants is less than or equal to 1 plus epsilon. So when delta and epsilon are 0 and M is large enough, it is full decentralization. And they study decentralization by the means of their definition of decentralization. So there are attempts to modelize in academic research decentralization. I was interested, but maybe you will give me more references about this, about limits about the centralizations. Yes, and even the possible negative effects of decentralization, because I like to have things balanced. So I found this paper. Okay, well, maybe you tell me there are better papers. They provide statistical analysis whose results may seem paradoxical. They find that decentralization at the blockchain level affects returns positively. They have a model, as one would expect, since the promise of blockchain is decentralization. But also find that decentralization at both the protocol and organizational levels affect return negatively. I found also another paper more on the role of the law. It's Nate's. She provides a discussion on blockchain, decentralization issues, and the role of the law. She argues that blockchains rely upon certain agents of influence for decision-making purposes. About trust, so I think one of the consequences to change it can change the way we envisager, the way we think about trust. So trust have been studied across many different disciplines. So there is a review on interpersonal trust among strangers across many disciplines, including psychology, economics, political science, sociology, law, etc. There are studies about the economic analysis of trust by Tasdaït. He has a book, it's in French, but he provides insights for a study of the economic analysis of trust. And of course, the question is also about trust in technical systems. Discussions are often about under-trust and over-trust to be avoided. Network structure. So when I wrote the paper, it was for network scientists. So network science analysis of blockchain is developing quickly through empirical and theoretical studies. There are methods being developed to answer issues such as which are the influential nodes, etc. in blockchain networks, usual questions in network science. Specific structural measures, including centrality notions, are being discussed. The analysis is mostly on the transaction and user graphs. For example, there's a paper by Maesa and literature afterwards that analyzes the topological properties of the Bitcoin transaction graph to obtain insights in the behavior of the users, in particular the in-degree distribution of the Bitcoin users graph. And they argue that some users' behaviors are not strictly related to usual economic interaction. There are also dynamic network analysis that is being developed. As an example, there's a paper by Scholar that underlines that improving how information is stored and, more importantly, how it propagates across the blockchain network are open research questions, and they propose a propagation approach. And what I think is interesting also, it's about digital geographies, because I think all these things about networks and blockchains and Okay, they changed the geographies. So the study of community structures is one of the most relevant key features in the study of real-world complex networked systems. There are also analyses developed in the area of digital geographies. For example, Dodge and Kitchen worked on a very beautiful atlas of cyberspace. And they are discussing now in digital geographies about analysis of mapping as new cartographies of networks and territories. And there are papers also about blockchain and the traditional nation-state relationships. A very short word about, but from the network science point of view. So of course, as you know, there is a huge literature about privacy, anonymization, etc. Specifically about anonymity in asynchronous system. But for example, community detection tools, which are network science tools, can be used to argue that studying the Bitcoin, it was for the Bitcoin transaction network, such tools can be used to re-identify multiple addresses belonging to a same user. About immutability, you know, it's also irrevocability. So there is ongoing research on solving these conflicts. There are surveys on immutability challenges, and there are frameworks that try to make it possible to rewrite or compress the content of any number of blocks in decentralized services exploiting the blockchain technology, or to erase data. And of course, you know better than me about blockchains and GDPR and things like that. Voilà. About security, I think it's a two-sided issue. It's issues on one side on data security and privacy when using blockchains, and another side on using blockchain technology for data security and privacy. And about risks, I think there is a lot of work, academic work to do about risks. And, but there are many definitions and conception of risks. So there are discussions on legal risk of blockchain. I think you know better than me. There are indicators being developed about complex network structure. And I think we must not forget the problem of storage and obsolescence, obsolescence of platform implementations and things like that. I think there are issues not to be forgotten. And in the case of network analysis, cascading failures in blockchains are also studied. About new economic theory models, how long have I had? 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, so very short. I thought I wouldn't. Okay, so about economic theory models, they lead both to adapt existing frameworks and models, and to depart from them, of course. So there are discussions. Évidemment, you know that. Maybe I will. Yes, I will focus on that slide, maybe. So about institutional crypto economics, blockchain can be thought of as an institutional innovation. So there are 2 papers by Berg, maybe you know, that introduces a form of organization adapted to decentralized distribution ledger. Maybe there are ideas to think about there. And in another paper, he studies the institution economic dynamics of widespread blockchain technology adoption, examining the structural economic effects of this institutional innovation as disintermediation in markets, of organization and growing private provision of economic infrastructure for exchange, contracting, and coordination. Okay, there are equilibrium models that are being developed. There is the question for, it's not blockchain, it's about cryptocurrency. Is it a money? So no, some say no, because of the limited quantity for Bitcoin, because of the transactions that cannot be cancelled, because of some converting difficulties. Or maybe it's an interesting issue to think digital currencies and the concept of money as a social agreement. Okay, there are models for currency competition and central banking. Okay, I will conclude with interoperability and adoption because I think it's important. So interoperability between blockchains, between systems. So there is a need of thinking on the scale of a network of networks, a network of systems. So there are passes like Interledger that encompasses several different approaches that attempt to establish interoperability among different distributed ledgers or blockchain. And about adoption, I thought about the digital divide. So the term digital divide has typically referred to the gap between those who have access to certain technologies and those who do not, as one emphasizes. There are discussions on how blockchain and alternative networks can bridge the digital divide and facilitate economic inclusion. Bitcoin, I cite Jude Meyer in the book, a recent book. Bitcoin shows how difficult the fundamentals are to understand for non-expert users, not to mention the fact that there is still very little awareness and understanding of systems other than cryptocurrencies that rely on the principle of blockchains. And for example, here is the tattoo. There are initiatives as the 5-volume comic Las Aventuras de Quirquinchó by Castro and Quesada. It's available freely on the web, and Quirquinchó going through diverse adventures that explain basic concepts of the blockchain. Thank you very much.